Hello and welcome to the Underhive. We are back with some more How to Command the Death Guard. In this series, we're going to take a look at every aspect of the Death Guard, so whether you're looking to get more out of your army, or you're thinking of joining Nurgle's feculent festivities, then there's something here for you. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at a 1,000 point incursion list that I've put together based on the most common units that I expect are in any Death Guard player's collection. Now, the reason for putting this together is really to try and inspire any of you out there that have perhaps got some models, maybe part built, part painted, and they've not made their way to the tabletop as yet. These are the most common units that I've seen available on second-hand marketplaces, like, say, eBay, as job lot available to buy. So even if you don't own any models, you can probably pick up the majority of the units in this list in a single second-hand job lot. I personally do buy models occasionally second-hand, particularly if they're already painted to a paint scheme and a standard that I'm happy with. But even just saving you the time on building a model, as well as getting it slightly cheaper than you otherwise would have, can be a good investment if you wanted that model anyway. So given that, and the fact that I have seen these models very frequently on eBay and other second-hand marketplaces, I feel that if you are interested in having a game of Nephilim 40k, then a 1,000 point incursion list like this would be a great place for you to start. Now, although I'm terming this essentially a starter list, that's not to say the units in this list are bad. In fact, many of the units in this list appear in a 2,000 point first place GT list from very recently. Though the loadouts aren't exactly the same, it's not to say that these units are bad, is the point. So let's dive in and take a look at the list, and then I've got a few analytical points for you as well. So we are running a single patrol detachment just to keep it simple, and we are running that as the Mortarian's Anvil, the 3rd Plague Company. Now, I've spent all 3 CP up front. I will come back to that in a few minutes anyway. But in the HQ slot, we've got a Lord of Contagion with the Gloaming Blow Warlord trait and the Warp Insect Hive. And we've also got a Malignant Plaguecaster. We're taking the spells Miasma of Pestilence and Curse of the Leper, as well as spending the 3rd and final CP on a relic, the Plague Skull of Glorfilla. In the troop slot, we've got a squad of 10 Plague Marines. You can kit them out how you'd like, but I've gone here with the Fist and Plasma Gun on the Champion, 1 Blight Launcher, 2 Melter Guns, 2 Flails, 2 Cleavers, and 2 with Mace and Axe. The second troop slot, we've got 15 Poxwalkers. Now, you can definitely cut up to 5 of them if you wanted to take some deadly pathogens. I've not done that here just to keep it simple. In the elite slot, we've got 5 Blightlord Terminators with 1 upgrade. We've got the Flail of Corruption on one of them. And we've got a Noxious Blightbringer, the most common Fetid variant I've seen for sale secondhand, and was the first Fetid variant I owned, given it came in the Plague War box set with the Death Guard and the Marines. Rounding out the list, we've got a Fetid Bloat Drone with Flesh Mower, and a singular Mephitic Blight Hauler. So, why have we built the list in this way? Firstly, my intention was to use units that I feel would very commonly be in people's collections, even if they don't have an extensive collection. On top of that, these are solid units. There's nothing wrong with them. So we've got the Lord of Contagion there with his Plague Reaper. So that's the heavy weapon hitting at strength ×2. Well, I shouldn't say the word heavy because, of course, that has rules involved, but it's -1 to hit. It's a heavy melee weapon, if you like. So he's hitting on 3s because of the -1, and so we've got the Warp Insect Hive on him to give him full rerolls to hit and wound in melee. Quite often he's going to be wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s with the Plague Weapon if he's into infantry, but if he is into something that's particularly tough, or into a model that has a transhuman effect active, the reroll of wounds is going to be very, very good because he's hitting at strength 8, AP -3, flat damage 3. So any of those attacks that do get through are going to deal significant damage to whatever they're hitting, certainly enough to kill a variety of infantry models. The Malignant Plaguecaster, so we've got the, oh, and as well Gloaming Bloat, before I skip over it, on the Lord of Contagion. Gloaming Bloat, of course, gives him a secondary contagion effect to his contagion range, which is any enemy units within that range cannot overwatch or set to defend. So particularly of the two, the overwatch is more relevant there. If you're into something like Iron Hands or Tau that really like an overwatch, if they are close range, they're not going to be able to do that. And on top of that, the opponent units cannot re-roll to hit or to wound. So not only for the Lord of Contagion himself if he's in melee, but also anything that otherwise is being targeted by an enemy unit that's near the Lord of Contagion, that is going to be a significant damage reduction on average by the opponent not being able to be as consistent through the use of re-rolls. So I think overall, a good, strong HQ choice, very tough and durable, good melee output, and some nice utility by preventing rerolls. We've then got the Malignant Plaguecaster, got the Miasma of Pestilence for -1 to hit. That can go on any unit in the army. I think I'd be using it on the Bloat Drone to begin with, but we'll come back to why when I get to the Bloat Drone. But of course, you can put that on whatever unit your opponent's eyeing up, just to make it that bit more difficult for them to deal with it. And we've also then got Curse of the Leper for some mortal wound output. It's a lot better into infantry units, but you can still use it as a clutch against tougher units, maybe some light vehicles. If it is a heavier vehicle with high toughness or a monster with high toughness, then you may wish to just use a smite that turn, as it's likely to get a better output than the Curse of the Leper would. And we've also gone with the Plague Skull of Glyphilla, spending the 3rd pre-game CP, which gives us a mortal wound output out of phase. So if your opponent is cheeky enough to run something like Abaddon in a 1,000-point game, which can only be caught, where Abaddon can only take so much damage per phase, the fact that the Plague Skull of Glyphilla goes off in the movement phase means that you can stack the Plague Skull, then a Psychic Power, then some shooting, then some melee, to look to bring Abaddon or a similar, like a Catan unit, down as soon as possible, ideally in a single turn. We've then got the Plague Marines. Now, I've gone with a squad of 10 only because I feel that on average people will have 10 Plague Marines. If you've only got 5, you can run 5 and use the other points towards something else. But I've gone with a squad of 10 here. The idea with these 10 Plague Marines is that they can get out onto the near no man's land objective. They can hold that. They are fairly durable. If you can get them behind a ruin, perhaps, or perhaps behind some crates maybe, so that they are obscured, the opponent isn't going to be able to shoot them down and would have to move up to them in order to get that shot. At which point it may be relevant to move the Plague Marines out, shooting anything that's high value with the melters and perhaps the Blight Launcher, and of course on the charge, the Cleavers are high strength, high damage as well. The Flails and the Mace, not necessarily as potent against high toughness targets, but when they get through, they are good damage, so it's worth playing those odds sometimes and just charging it. But particularly if you can get some good value out of those 2 Melter Guns, you will be glad of them. The squad of 15 Poxwalkers, they are purely here to hold the back objective. So, of course, you could cut 5 of them and spend those 25 points in whatever way you feel is more relevant. But I've just gone for 15 here for the sake of ease. So the idea is they are holding 1 towards the primary for you all game, unless your opponent comes in and really wants to have a go at them. And they are also able to spread the sickness at least on that home objective to secure you another 3 victory points that your opponent can't prevent. I quite like to leave a little gap to kind of bait the opponent into coming into the Poxwalkers. They'll quite often, if they've got the option, shoot at them first. And then, of course, you can remove the models closest to that unit and make it more like a 10 or perhaps 11-inch charge. And then, of course, when they fail that, which they're quite likely to do, you can then bring models back to the Poxwalker squad in your next command phase with the stratagem for 1 CP. So they are there to act as a bit of bait. You don't have to leave an opening if you don't want to. And of course, the idea is that they just simply control an objective and make playing the primary for max points as easy as possible for you and put that burden of how to play the game effectively on your opponent. The squad of 5 Blight Lords are there to hold the central objective. Along with the Noxious Blightbringer, they will be able to get +1 to their move and +1 to their advance, and as Death Guard infantry, they don't care about difficult ground, so they're not going to get slowed up by that. So on certain map layouts, they can actually end up feeling quicker than a normal Marine unit that would be penalised by the difficult ground debuff. So with the Noxious Blightbringer in there, it is certainly possible to position in a way where the Plague Marines can get access to the benefit that turn as well, so they may be able to push out onto that no man's land objective turn 1 with an advance. There's not an awful lot of shooting in there. All of the Plague Marine squad have assault weapons, so if there is a target in range, you would still be able to shoot those weapons at a -1. The Blight Lords on the advance won't be able to shoot, of course they've got rapid fire weapons, but that's not too much of a detriment. 16 bolter shots, you might expect to pick a model off an infantry squad here and there, but the real meat of what they're doing is in melee. They've got 4 Bubotic Axes, so that's going to be, because one of them's on the champion, so he's got 4 attacks plus another 9. So you've got 13 attacks with Bubotic Axes at strength 6, AP 2, damage 1, and a further 6 attacks with the flail at strength 5, AP 1, damage 2. So they can certainly deal with infantry units that come onto that central objective fairly well, but supported by the Noxious Blightbringer, the Malignant Plaguecaster, and the Lord of Contagion, whilst the Noxious Blightbringer doesn't do anything particularly amazing, he has got a plasma pistol, so, you know, that can chip a wound off a model. Strength 7, AP 3, damage 1 is reasonably likely to do some work most of the time. I wouldn't recommend overcharging it, though, because on a hit roll of a 1, he will die. The Blight Lords are likely to be getting reroll 1s if you're keeping the Lord of Contagion nearby, because he is a Lord of the Death Guard, so that's going to make them that bit more consistent. And of course, you have got the option to spend CP on +1 to hit or +1 to wound for your Terminators when that's going to feel relevant. On top of that, if they are nearby the Lord of Contagion, they're also getting the benefit of opponents, particularly in melee, not being able to reroll hits and wounds into them, whilst they are going to be getting reroll 1s to hit from the Lord of Contagion and reroll 1s to wound from having plague weapons. So that differential there can be the difference between you losing only 1 model, where you might have lost 2, and your opponent losing 2 or 3, where they might have only lost 1 or 2. And that certainly does add up across multiple turns of a game. The Noxious Blightbringer isn't really a slouch in melee. He's hitting at strength 4, AP -1, damage 2, and it is a plague weapon, so he can certainly deal with an infantry model or 2 each turn, 2 perhaps if you're lucky. So the main reason he's there is because he is the most common fetid Virion unit in all of the box sets. So I feel like most of you probably have a Noxious Blightbringer, and like me, probably doesn't see an awful lot of play. But he is fine in terms of his output, and he's not particularly expensive at 60 points. If it does allow you to get those Blightlord Terminators in position turn 1, on that central objective alongside the Plaguecaster and the Lord of Contagion, that can be very effective, because his effect is Plague Company Core and Plague Company Fetid Virion. It isn't actually going to add to the movement of the Lord of Contagion and the Plaguecaster, but at least they'll be near enough by the Terminators that they will still get Lookout Surf from him. So realistically, getting the HQs onto the objective isn't as important as getting the Terminators on there, because the Terminators are OBSEC, where the HQs are not. Rounding out the list, we've got the fast attack slot. So the Fetid Bloat Drone, I think, is the prime beneficiary of Miasma of Pestilence in the first few turns of the game, and that's because it is a fast flying melee only threat. So your opponent will, if they have the option, look to shoot it down before it can get any value. It is fairly tough, at toughness 7 with a 3-up save, Armour of Contempt, and a 5-up invul. So giving it -1 to hit on top of that means it will take a significant amount of firepower to bring down. Fortunately, it doesn't bracket, so you're not really losing anything if it takes a few hits. But on top of that, it has access to a brilliant stratagem, Demonic Gluttony. If it kills a model in the fight phase, it heals a wound, and you can do that for up to 3 models killed, up to 3 wounds regained. On top of that, it's a great scorer for fleeing vectors. because it's got 12 attacks at strength 7, AP -2, flat damage 2. So it's great for dealing with infantry, and of course fleeing vectors scores up to 7 models killed, or rather from 7 models killed you get your point. And of course if those 7 models were killed with a plague weapon, you would get an additional point. On top of that, if you can leave, say, a model alive, I wouldn't, pull your punches, so to speak. You have to declare all your attacks, but if you are in the position where you kill 4 of the 5 models in an infantry squad, it's quite likely to need to take a morale test, and if it fails, not only is the unit getting out of there, because that was the last model, but you would score an additional 3 victory points for the models failing morale as a result of units killed with plague weapons. So the fetid bloat drone there, if you are taking fleeing vectors, is a great way to score points. It is really reliant on your opponent having some amount of infantry. If they don't, maybe you're up against a more of a skew list, more vehicle or monster heavy, then of course you wouldn't necessarily want to take fleeing vectors. But at strength 7 AP 2 and flat 2 damage, it can still do work into tough vehicles and monsters. They're just not the ideal target. The Mephitic Blight Hauler here is to do what the rest of the list does not, and that is to provide some mobile, heavy firepower. It's got a multi-melter and a crack missile per turn, so can potentially get out 3d6 worth of damage, though you're not likely to land all the shots that frequently. But when you do, it's a really significant damage output. It's got great range on the missile, so you can take out something that's perhaps trying to hang back and pick off your units. And the multi-melter, of course, slightly shorter range, but ultimately still 24-inch and good enough to take out something across the majority of the mid-board, as long as you can get line of sight. When it does get up close, it's got that bile spurt for D3 shots at strength 6, AP 1, damage 1. Nothing really to write home about, but it might get you an extra plague weapon kill, and that could be relevant for your fleeing vectors. So overall, I'm quite happy with this list. It's quite well balanced around playing the primary, playing the Death Guard secondaries, and overall having an answer to whatever an opponent might bring. We've got the Lord of Contagion that can fight pretty much anything. It's quite happy to sort of stand and look to outlast whatever the opponent might throw at them, because you're limiting their access to rerolls quite consistently. The Plague Caster's there to deal mortal wounds, so whatever unit in the opponent's army is the most threatening, we'd be looking to get the Plague Caster in range to get some mortal wound output on them. The Plague Marines are going to be great for holding an objective and spreading the sickness on it early, as well as then perhaps moving on and being a mixed ranged and melee threat to the opponent's heavy vehicles or monsters. Those melters, and particularly the Cleaver, can be great for that. Poxwalkers, just there to score us some points. Terminators, largely there just to score us some points, but also great for fleeing vectors, because of course they've got a good number of attacks on plague weapons. Noxious Blightbringer can add towards fleeing vectors, but he's really there just to use the model and to help make sure those Blightlord Terminators get where you want them as soon as possible, even with a poor advance roll. And then the Bloat Drone, of course, much quicker than the rest of the army and can fly, so that's going to be there to harry the opponent and ideally draw fire even through the Miasma of Pestilence, because it is a target your opponent needs to remove. And the Blight Hauler there to pick up the slack and dish out the firepower to whatever your opponent's most threatening unit is. So yeah, overall, very happy with it. I'd love to know what you think. Would you be interested in running a list like this, or would you want to swap something out? If you would, I'd be delighted to hear, because, as I say, this isn't necessarily an optimized list, but it's not to say that any of the units in it are terrible. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time in the Underhive.